Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming along to this webinar this evening. We're all really excited to see you here and hope that everyone finds that this to be a very informative evening. We're going to get cracking straight away with Ian Davidson-Watts with his presentation on tracking bats over large distances. Ian will have to dash off early, so won't be able to stay for the Q&A afterwards. So rather than waiting to the end for his questions, please can we we'll do them quickly afterwards. So just some quick housekeeping. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end with the panelists. We are going to have some live polls throughout the event this evening, so please feel free to take part. All participants have been muted. You may switch on your cameras if you so wish. We will be recording this webinar, and a link will be sent to all attendees post-event. So if you would like to share this afterwards with other members of your groups, that's absolutely fine. So Ian, when you're ready, I'll take it away.
Right, I think trying to get my microphone button off it's probably a first start, whilst also trying to share a screen. It's never a good idea. So let's say hi first and pop my face up there with a pretty packed round of Lake Tekapo in New Zealand, for those who don't know it, behind me. I'm actually calling from the UK, and absolutely I need to dash off because I've got some tags on some bats, and this evening I need to go out and watch them come out of some trees and catch some more. So quite busy at the moment at this time of year. I'm just gonna now, hopefully you'll see my screen. I don't know, Sarah, can you just let me know that that's all go?
Yep, we can see everything clearly. Thank you very much.
Right. Okay, so look, my talk isn't a paper, it's not a presentation. My brief was to provide just some experiences really for those perhaps thinking about starting out doing some radio tracking, or perhaps already involved and wanting to improve some of the sort of work they do with manual VHF, and I suppose that's where my main experience lies. And I'm ashamed I won't be able to see all this presentation, but I'll be certainly the link, because I'm very interested in some of the other subject matters and the other experts on the talk today. Just a little bit about me. I've been involved in radio tracking bats, which is coming up to 30 years now. Started sort of in the mid-90s. I really got stuck into it I was trapping in the mid-90s, and then we did some radio tracking in the late 90s of Bechstein's bats, and that moved on to Barberstells, horseshoes, and other sort of rarer species in the UK. And I run a company in New Zealand and in the UK which sort of specialises in this area. And we work on some of the big projects around there, but we also do quite a lot of community work, particularly in New Zealand, trying to build capacity and that sort of thing. And at the moment, we seem to be dominated by quite a lot of wind farm work in New Zealand as well. And in the UK, it seems to be a bit of everything. I do have a bit of a background in the academic side on radio tracking. My PhD radio track pipistrelle bats. I'm also involved in the radio tracking of Barberstells, which was particularly challenging at the time till we learned a little bit more about them. And I've also collaborated with quite a lot of other really good researchers on other species like Bechstein's bats and some of the swarming bats and things like that. But I'm not really an academic. I've dabbled, and I've more been probably an applied sort of biologist really when it comes to sort of working with the science and then trying to put that in sort of real world contexts for what we do on the ground. As I said, earlier, it's really wanted to talk about what you can do with VHF tracking. I mean, it's probably more of an art in some respects than a strict science, mainly because of those wavy radio waves that bounce around the landscape when you put a tag on a bat. But there's some amazing things you can do, and it's really turned, I think, bat sort of science around quite a bit over the last sort of 30, 40 years. As the technology's improved, and of course it's improving all the time, and companies like Lotek and Hill and others are, have been developing some really good bits of equipment to help us do that, as well as many other companies I've started to work with. But I suppose BioTrack and Lotek I've got probably the longest history with, being UK based, and I've been using their kit well for the last 30 years really. So with bats, and I'm focused predominantly on our small temperate species of Europe and New Zealand predominantly. I've done a bit of work elsewhere in Cyprus and stuff like that, but I'm going to focus primarily on those with some case studies as well towards the end. But finding tree roosts has been actually one of the biggest advantages of radio tracking bats, because they're just so hard to find at other times of the year, given the fact that they move around so much and they're often very inconspicuous. So when we check out buildings that they leave better signs like droppings, well, with radio tracking has been quite important for a lot of big projects that we've worked on, particularly for those tree roosting bats. I tend to call it flying behavior rather than foraging behavior. A lot of people sort of put down foraging behavior, but actually one of the limitations of radio tracking is unless you can hear it with a bat detector at the same time, you don't really know what the bat's actually doing. Commuting is probably one of the clearest things if it's moving from A to B quite quickly, but I often refer to in my work as flying behavior or activity patterns, because foraging, it may be foraging, it may be checking out new roosts, it may be visiting other bats, it may be socializing. So it's always difficult to know what the bat's actually doing. So I'd encourage people to be sort of careful with their terminology there. People have probably heard of the terminology around home ranges, and there's various different ways of calculating those. But fundamentally, that's trying to give an area of sort of operation, for the bats, and not necessarily a territory, but it might have important areas that the bats use within a larger sort of home range, and that's quite a well understood terminology. And within that, as I've talked about, there might be core areas that the bats uses more proportionately, which again gives an indication of what's important for it in the resource in resource use. And from that, you can determine things like habitat preferences. But I think compared to perhaps some of the other talks, and I'm not going to sort of prejudge what they're going to say there. One thing I find about manual radio tracking is actually being out there with the bat and actually experiencing, the kind of environment the bat's using at the time it's using it. Now, there's some consequences to that on human health, if nothing else, but, actually observing bats and finding a tree roost like this near a dawn when the bats are behaving like this, that, nothing replicates that as a bat biologist. And I think that for me, it's often worth the sort of pain and suffering you go through to get to this point. But there are some challenges, and some of the challenges really we have with bats, of course, is, they're small, a lot of them, the ones I work on in particular, and that means that has consequences for the size of the transmitters. And obviously, being aerial species, bats can't carry a lot of weight, and so we're limited really in what we can use. There's also, with VHF in particular, lots of issues around signal detection and terrain. And in New Zealand, I can assure you, it's certainly an area where, there are some big land masses that get in the way of signals, and bats can disappear very quickly into steep and difficult terrain. And of course, because the tags are small, you've got issues around the longevity of those tags, but also, the power they can kick out as well. So compared to a lot of other species out there that can carry tags for months and carry big tags with lots of power, we don't get that advantage with bats. And it's important because there's a welfare issue with bats, and we need to make sure that we're not overloading the bats, and we're not putting them at risk. So it's really important that we do that. But again, the technology has improved massively, the reliability, the weights, and some of the micro electronics that are performed are quite amazing, really, considering where I started sort of 30 years ago. And then we've got attachment methods. So bats are quite good at scratching off tags if you use the wrong glue. And I must have tried about 8 or 9 different types of glue. And I certainly have my favorites. And it's a shame they're not doing skin bond anymore, because that was something that we used to use quite a bit. But I'm very reluctant to use things like vet bond now, because it's a bit like super glue, and if you make a mistake with that, it's very difficult to clean that up. And of course, fundamentally, and I've sort of touched on it really, is that it's very resource hungry with people VHF tracking, manual tracking, and it's also people need to be out at night tracking bats, and of course that brings a whole load of other health and safety issues that you wouldn't necessarily have with other forms of perhaps remote tracking. And that's something that really needs consideration. Is it's dark. And of course, you need to be out there with the bat when the bat's doing its thing to get the data you need. And fundamentally, a colleague of mine nearly failed his PhD before he started because he couldn't actually catch the bats he needed to. He did in the end with the use of the lure systems that were being introduced at the time. But yeah, you've got to catch the bat as a means to an end to obviously radio track it. So there's obviously a few ways of radio tracking bats, and a lot of it's done on foot, depending on the species you're dealing with it. But invariably, getting into vehicles is also quite important. The base unit for everyone, I think, on this seminar today is getting your fix. You need to try and work out where the bat is, and again, that has a number of challenges and limitations, and again, those need to be factored in. For those who aren't familiar, there's sort of two main approaches with VHF manual tracking. One is using either fixed people or fixed stations, or roaming people, but working together as a team to try and take bearings simultaneously to work out where the bat might be. And the other method that's well known is the close approach method. Is you know, if the bat's staying put for a bit in a particular area, you can get closer to it. But they have their limitations, and as I said earlier, it's a bit of an art. It's something that you might start off, and 10 years later you realize how little you knew and perhaps how inaccurate your work was when you started out. And it comes with experience. I've met a lot of people who've radio tracked electric fences because they just didn't know the difference. It was just one of those things. And so, training people and teaching people these things are quite important. And we have quite a big system in our company where we bring people on, and they go through a season of sort of training with experienced mentors really before they're let out on their own. There's also equipment limitations. We talked about the tags being limited, but also the combination of your antenna, cables that break easily. Surveyors are great at sort of throwing things at the back of the car, particularly at 5 o'clock in the morning when they're tired. And each time they do that, a coax cable gets stretched and stretched and stretched, and then someone's hearing a bat and someone isn't. And of course, it's probably down to the cable, or perhaps the receiver's been damaged, or the antenna. And it's just things like that, and making sure your kit's working. And then there's general accuracy areas, depending on the landscape you're in, and a whole range of different respects to people's ability to take bearings at night as well, and try and understand where the bat might be. And fundamentally, and I've seen it, and I've probably caused it in the past, is that you turn up to a place where you think a bat is with a big white light on your head, and then the bat keeps moving on. And you're probably finding that your presence there is actually disturbing the bat, so it's altering its behavior. And of course, tagging the bat in the first place may alter its behavior as well. So there's a range of different things there. And just to sort of wrap up, I've got a few case studies here. These are New Zealand long-tailed bats. If you wanted to know, you can just make out a little antenna there from a radio tag. And here we had quite a difficult bat to track. They're very fast. They can fly sort of 60 kilometers an hour when they're going. We tracked a bat. It did 10 kilometers in just over 10 minutes. At dawn, it flew pretty much in a straight line back to its roost. This is its roosting area here. And these were the bats we tagged from there. So to get around that, we actually used a pan and tilt system with a little remote control that went through the window. And I had a joystick sort of glued to my dashboard, and my sort of driver could operate the antenna from inside the vehicle, which meant we could keep up with the bats, which was quite useful. Just recently, we've been working on some greater horseshoes in Hampshire. We thought they might be connected to a special area conservation over here in Dorset, and lo and behold, just in April, end of April, we tracked a number of bats that went that far, 30 kilometers in a night, and then stayed there probably then for the breeding season before they moved back to their wintering site in Hampshire. So again, really useful, but very tricky. And the reason we worked that out was because it was a known greater horseshoe site. So we didn't have to track the bat all the way there. I mean, we tried to, it was almost impossible. But the next day we sort of, went to this area, and we managed to pick the bat up. And so that pre-knowledge is really important, and good connections with other bat sort of biologists in the area is really useful. And then finally, the sort of I guess the adrenaline one is the use of helicopters. And I'm ex-military, and I used to fly around with the Army Air Corps many years ago, and I had a couple of contacts. So I'm quite familiar working in helicopters, but there are still limitations for finding bats, again, in difficult terrain. And we had to use helicopters in New Zealand to find roosts in some of this dense bush and this mountainous terrain. Because these bats were flying 22, 23 kilometers each night. So it's not, it's not a case of using a drone in these situations, because I've no doubt that will be a question. This is all fairly quite large scale stuff. And again, there's some nuances to that. It's not that easy to track from the air. There's lots of noise, there's lots of electrical interference. You need little boxes to reduce that. And you need to be quite comfortable with the door off, on the side of the helicopter to be able to get an antenna out. Of course, there are other systems, but this gave me a fair bit of flexibility. So I think that's me. I was just asked to give it sort of 10 to 15 minutes, and hopefully I've kept within that. So Sarah, back to you. I don't know if anybody's got any questions.
Hi, Ian. Yeah, thank you very much for that talk, and thank you very much again for taking the time out your evening to do this talk. I understand it's a very busy time of year for you. So yes, we've got a few minutes now if people want to put questions in the chat for Ian. Otherwise, if you haven't got, if you think of one later, just let us know and we'll pass them on for him to answer.
Yeah, I've got a question just popped up on my screen. I mean, I might have missed all of them, but it's about what's the best glue. For me at the moment, it's the Manfred Sauer glue, which is from Germany. It's difficult to move around because it's flammable, so that people don't like it on planes, but I try and get it locally. So I've got some here, and that's been really good. The other stuff I've used with good success, but perhaps not as good as the Manfred Sauer glue, is Torbot. But again, people have had mixed results with that. But we're trying another glue called Eurobond in New Zealand at the moment, which again, it's mostly pretty effective. But I think there's probably a lot of reasons why the bats are able to scratch off these tags sometimes a bit earlier than you hope. But yeah, I think the Manfred Sauer at the moment, I'll give a plug for that. That seems to be the one I like anyway.
And sort of as a follow-up to that from Tyson, how long do they last on average attached to the bat before the bats scratch them off?
Well, again, there's quite a lot of variability with when you tag. So what I've found, and again, we're collecting data on it now because we do a lot of bats. We've radio tracked 1,200 bats over the last 12 years, and probably for the last 5 years, I've been purposefully capturing data on whether people are trimming first. So I don't trim I haven't done since 2001. And there doesn't appear to be a massive difference between people who trim, who don't trim. I just feel it's an unnecessary step if you don't need to. And the glues, we're also asking what sort of glues. But again, the problem is that the age of the glue might be a factor, the conditions when you tag it. So moisture conditions, I've found the tags don't seem to, but that's more of, again, I haven't tested any of this statistically. It's purely an observation looking at the sort of data at the moment. So there's quite a lot of variables, I think. How much glue people put on is probably another factor. So there's quite a lot there to sort of get into. And obviously how people actually do it and how they're taught to do it is probably another major factor.
Yes, definitely. It's possibly a subject for someone's PhD out there is retention times on bats, comparing different ones. And so why are those such good glues to use?
So the Manfred Sauer and the Torbot, they're kind of latex based, which basically makes them a bit spongy, and they're non-toxic. They're designed for, well, as I always joke when I do talks, is they're tested on people first.
Yes.
And yeah, so the Manfred Sauer is actually a urinary sheath glue, or a penis glue, if I put it bluntly. Always gets a laugh. But that does seem to be best, and the others are generally associated with medical, situations like colostomy bags and that sort of thing. Yeah, I can put the glue down a bit later.
If you put the spell the name, because I've got the name written in some what I think is the right.
I'll send a link to it. Yeah,
fantastic. Because somebody else has asked. Thank you, Philip. Somebody else has asked green or blue tube. Now, I'm not sure what that means. I suppose that there's two different recipes out there, or two different.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't catch that. Renal blue tube. Is that
red or blue
type?
tube? I wonder if that's.
Oh, I use
like...
the green tube. Yeah, so like a turquoise color. Yeah.
So there's two types out there as well. So there's the green tube and the blue tube.
Yeah, I haven't tried the other one, but that doesn't mean it's not any good.
No,
So,
somebody's just said it's lanolin free, which I know can be. It's a chemical that it's produced by sheep, if in their fleeces, lanolin, and it's used to moisturizers, things like that.
Yeah.
So you show. So I've just got one last question, then we'll wrap up. You showed us the tracking from an aerial.
Yeah.
So have you ever used drones, or is it just not worked in New Zealand?
No, so the drone story is I'm quite, I've got a good drone, and I'm trying to set up a Bluetooth system at the moment, which can get me a kilometer range, but they're not. I mean, I'm a big fan of technology. That's why I love bats, because there's a good excuse to buy a thermal camera or something. The thing with the thing with drones is that there's a lot of regulation that comes with drones when you really need them to do what you really need them to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you've got relatively sedentary situations and you've got full access landowners and everything else, and you haven't got massively tricky terrain where you can remain line of sight. So line of sight is probably the biggest challenge, and obviously flying at night is the biggest challenge. And certainly in New Zealand, and I know the UK, it's heavily regulated. In fact, I think out of line of sight is like one of the golden, the golden goose type things you can get as a drone. And you often need a whole organizational accreditation as well as having individuals with the right flying licenses to do that kind of stuff. So what I'm saying is that I think there's massive potential there for more development in this area, but it's a heavily regulated area. It's only going to get more regulated.
Yes.
So paying a pilot, sitting in a seat, that saved us. So for the same, that was about 2 hours flying we did, which cost me about $4,000, which is a lot in New Zealand. It's about £2,000. But that saved a whole week of work because of so you just got to apply the right tool for the right job. And then, take the sort of right approach to it. And, depending on the situation, there's no one answer, one tool for every job, is there?
No, there isn't. So again, thank you ever so much. I understand that you have to dash off. I really wish you the best of luck for your fieldwork tonight. Hope it all goes smoothly. And thank you very much again. Take care.
Okay, cheers guys. Bye.
Okay, so can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. Thank you very much. And we can hear you nice and clearly as well. So I would like to say, again, thank you very, very much for agreeing to present, and take it away, Olivier, with your presentation about tracking bats with GPS.
Yeah, so hello everyone. I'm here to present some feedback from the French National Forest Office experience. I've been working on bats for the last 20 years. And I already apologize for my level of English. It's going to be quite lame to pass just after Jan. I have this kind of French disease that we cannot speak English properly. So I hope it's going to be good and not too limiting. I agreed. I accepted to present an overview of what we are doing with GPS tagging. On the first slide, I just wanted to show you a few images of the Lotek equipment that we use in our studies. So you have here different types of GPS tags. Here is a device that we used that enables communication between the tag and the computer. And here another device for remote data download. In which you can plug a classical Yagi antenna. And just, you will understand just after why I said that, but here you have two small hooks, and you need to clip the hook on the two loops here in order to communicate with the computer and the software to set the tag up. So here is a different type of tags that we use. and we'll see just after why there are different versions of it. So we first started our experiments with a small study involving the greater horseshoe bat in France, in the south of France. I mentioned this first study mainly because of a relatively fun fact. So here, it was the really beginning of our experiments with GPS tagging, and it was quite challenging because horseshoe bat here weighed around 20 grams, and we wanted to respect the 5% rule, so we needed a tag that didn't weigh more than 1 gram. So that was that kind of tag of GPS with a GPS sensor with the antenna here, but no beacon, so no way to find the animal during the day, and no remote VHF download. So the recapture of the bat was mandatory in order to get the data. And it was a very small GPS tag, so it allowed mostly around 80 fixes. So we tried with 5-minute time steps, and it wasn't running all night long. It was very short, and it was just an experiment to find a secondary roost. And we equipped 3 animals. And the fun fact is, I decided to. I was very at that time. I was very worried about the battery and how long would the tag last. It was the first experiment, so I decided to attach to glue the tag at the back of the animal first, and then reconnect the 2 loops to activate at the last time to be sure that the battery will be fully charged. And of course, the bat went into spasm just after I equipped with the tag, and she managed to escape before I got the chance to activate the tag. So my first try got me the first tip: do not glue the tag before activation, because it was quite lame to see the bat flying with the tag on the back, and the tag wasn't activated. So it was very, very lame. So it was just for the fun fact, but finally we got one tag with back with the data. It was a first quite successful story, but without any jokes. But for this talk, I will focus on the case of the greater nocturnal bat, which is a forest bat. Reason why my organization, the National Forest Office in France, is trying to take care of this species and integrate the species into our forest management guidelines. So we've learned many things on this species over the last 2 decades, but there are still lots of gray areas. And when you look at the distribution map, you see that we still have lots to learn about it. This species is a fairly big one, so it weighs around 40 to 60 grams, which allows us to equip with fairly big tags, including GPS and beacon and lots of technology and lots of sensors in it. So it's very interesting. And as I said, it's a forestal bat, so it roosts in only in cavities in the trees, and it's a high aerial hawking bat that can also partially migrate. So we need. It's very complicated to follow with classical tracking, and it's the most complicated species to track when it comes to forest animals, because they are switching roost every day, so it's very complicated. So it was challenging, but the GPS technology was very promising for this kind of species. So over the last 7 years with this species, we've been working on this species at various different sites in the south of France, and we were able to equip almost 100 individuals with the Lotek GPS tags. And here you can see on the chart, when you have brackets here, it's to distinguish the tags with data recovered here, 3 compared to the one without data. So we equipped 4 animals, and only 3 we were able to get the data back. So here you can see what it looks like with the animal with the tag at the back. So it's quite it's not that heavy because we are okay with the 5%, sometimes 6 or 7% weight rules, but it's very it's quite large, and sometimes it was disturbing to put such a big tag at the back of the animal. And so you see that we studied for 7 years, and we started with a GPS that allowed with different sensors, the accelerometers, of course, the GPS position. It had a beacon, so we can, like Jan presented just before, we are able to get the signal to locate the animal during the day, and you have a lot of possibilities to schedule all these sensors between night and days, and hour by hour to activate one or the other of these sensors. So during the first years, we only had that type of tag. It was already promising, but it meant that we needed to recapture the animal to collect the data. So at that time, we went through difficult experience. With some case, we managed to reach the tree with the animal, but after sometimes several hours of walking on difficult terrain, you can see here in the Pyrenees, and with a lot of slopes. So in the end, we were at the foot of the tree, but unable to collect the data. While at dusk, seeing the bat flying over our head, and without any data in the end. So even with that kind of techniques, we tried canopy, mist netting, or we tried to climb on the after the animal left the roost to collect the tag inside the roost. But sometimes it didn't work, and it was very annoying. So we switched after a few years to this kind of technology, which is a pinpoint GPS VHF 50. 50 is because it's a big ones for that kind of bat with 3 grams tag. So it was twice the price, but it was worth it, definitely. So with this one, you have the data download remotely with that kind of device. So you can download GPS data when you are at the foot of the tree, and with this, at the beginning, we were very shy, and we wanted to save the battery, but we learned that more than 90% of the battery consumption is a result of GPS fixes, and you can try to download the data many times a day without having a lot of effect on the life of the data life of the tag. So that's good to know. And we didn't use also automatic and fixed antennas on the ground. So our method was to find the roost with the colony and then download data from the foot of the tree. That could be an improvement to have a permanent and fixed antenna, but we didn't use that. And it was pretty convenient anyway. So about settings, I wanted to do a presentation about the different kind of settings, because we experienced and we ran a lot of different tries all over the years, and it was interesting to explain at what point we settled in the end. So time steps is very interesting, and it's a everyday question. So at the beginning, we did a lot of tests with 5 minutes, 10 minutes, sometimes 20 or 30-minute time steps, hoping that the tag will stay on the animal for many days, and we will be able to have more interesting data. But finally, we settled on a 2-minute time step for several reasons. First of all, the minimum value allowed with that kind of tag is 2 minutes, so we went to the minimum value, and it was the best temporal resolution for interpreting changing in flight behaviors, which was one of our questions about forest management. So we needed that precision, and also the main reason why we did that is because we used an accelerometer triggering. So the accelerometer, it's that kind of figure. It's three sort of balls with a spring here, and the movement of the animal causes the ball to exert pressure on the spring, and the value of each pressure is detected by the sensor on each axis. And here, with big tags, you can have all the value for each axis, but with that kind of small tags with limited possibilities of data inside, you have proxy, which is a formula here, the ODBA, which is overall dynamic body acceleration, that you use. It's only one value for the three axes. And the result for that kind of animal is that we can see the evolution of ODBA through time, and that kind of graphic enables us to define different thresholds and finally find a good value to apply after. So here, another thing interesting. This species has a particular phenology and activity through the night. So at night, it has a short foraging activity at the beginning of the night and a very short at the end, sometimes even nothing at the end. So using this, we were interested to trigger GPS fixes only when the bat is moving. So after a series of tests, we set the value of ODBA at 250 or 300, and we needed, here you have a screenshot of the settings and parameters, and we had a GPS eye activity. So when the bat is flying, the tag tries to get GPS fixes every 2 minutes, and when the bat is back to the roost, it comes to a GPS classic basic activity, and GPS is only looking for satellites only every 2 hours. So with this, we managed to get a very nice result, and considering that the tag can do 600 fixes, around 600 fixes with that kind of tag, we were able to track the animal for 4 to 8 nights, depending on the activity she had. And a result like this, what is very interesting is that inside the roost, the tag cannot catch the satellites. So when the bat was inside the roost, there was not enough sat like this. So when you download the data from a distance remotely, you get that kind of sheet, and with this you can have a lot of information. For example, here it's at the end of the data of one tag. Here you can see every 2 minutes. Here the time step is 2 minutes, and you have GPS fixes. So the animal is still flying. Here we have the proof the animal is flying at that moment of the night, and just after here, all the animal, the GPS doesn't work, so the animal is back inside of the roost. And here you can see that there is 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, so the animal is moving, and then it switches to 2 minutes up to 2 hour time step. So the tag has been lost inside the roost because there is no GPS fixes. So we know just with this cheat that we can go catch and grab the tag inside the roost. And maybe another information, because you can see a drop of temperature. So maybe the colony was there until this moment, and here after that, the temperature is still low. So maybe the colony left the roost, and we can try to climb and get the tag back. And another example very fast. Here we have another example where 2 hours time step here with GPS fixes means that the tag fell on the ground. So we have to go there fast before the tag doesn't have any more battery, and we were able to find the tag on the ground. So just downloading the data said us how we can work afterwards. So just talk about high activity, but maybe for species that end by stalking, we can try the low activity parameters. I have several colleagues that are working with Tengmal boreal hole. So they are trying to set the tag with low activity, and maybe it can be useful for that kind of, but it's an internet picture, but it's a Rhinolophus. Which one is that? Rhinolophus trifoliatus, which the rhinolophs, the horseshoe bat in Europe are hunting by stalking. So maybe it could be a good option. I tried to be more a bit faster. Here, the last information is with the remote download. Usually, as I said, we go to the foot of the tree and we download the data just at the foot of the tree. But for this part of the study in 2024, we had all the animals roosting in the northern slope of this mountain, in beech fir forest in the altitude, but all but one that kept disappearing day after day. And she was reappearing at night, flying in the sky with the beacon, saying that it was around. So we put someone here in the top of the mountain at night. We waited for dusk, and we waited for the animal to rise in the sky, so to go up, and we try to download the data at night with the animal flying. And we experienced that we've been able to download the GPS data from a distance of 39 kilometers away from the flying bracket. We had the GPS fix exactly at the moment when we downloaded the data from this peak, and it was 39 kilometers away. So all the other roosts were here, and here it was hidden during the day in a small area, very far away from the other part of the study. So it was very interesting, because maybe on the next years we will change our techniques to download data maybe from high points, and it's very, very convenient, and we were very surprised that it worked so well. So this is a new roost in a flat area, whereas all the other one were in the mountain. I wanted to maybe show some result of the data involving all the GPS data and models, statistic models with the dataset. I presented that last year in the European Congress, but I think I have no time, so I will go fast. So maybe I will have the opportunity to have another presentation another time. But we have lots of work, and it's very interesting. We have lots of results with this species with just 2-minute time step GPS fixes. It's very interesting and very promising. So I go fast because we have lots of things to say. And what's next? Maybe integrate accelerometer data into the model to save the battery. I could explain, but it's quite complicated. But anyway, that could be interesting. And the most interesting part that I wanted to share with you is I would be interested to coordinate and harmonize study protocols across the species distribution. Actually, this bat is migrating, and maybe it would be interesting to harmonize all the protocols over Europe to pull the data to increase the data set and the statistical robustness of the results. That could be very interesting if everyone works the same, and maybe we could have a very interesting paper to publish. So sorry, I've been a bit long, so I'm stopping here.
Thank you very, very much, Olivier. No, it's it's a fascinating and really extensive, detailed study that you guys have done. So please don't apologize for running over. Especially, it seems that we've got this way more fascinating information from there for you guys to share, and we really are very excited to see what comes of that. So you will, if anyone has any questions for Olivier, could you please pop them into the chat, and we will have a discussion at the end with Olivier and Sander and Sean as a panel to discuss all of our questions. And in the meantime, we will get Sander Lagerveld ready to present his study, or his presentation on Motus. Which, if any of you have ever met me at a conference, I will bang the Motus drum. I will talk your ear off about it, because the more people involved in it, the better the system becomes, and the more incredible information that we can get from it.
Yeah, hello. Thanks, Sarah, for introducing me. Can you see my screen?
Give it a tick. Fantastic. Yes, we can. So with no further ado, please take it away, Sander.
Yeah, thank you. Well, my name is Sander Lagerveld. I work at the Wageningen University at the Marine Research Institute, and also in the Wildlife Ecology and Conservation group. And I will present on bat migration, a study which uses Nathusius pipistrelle to investigate bat migratory movements using the Motus Telemetry system. So what you probably all know is that several bat species perform migratory movements over large distances, and most migration goes over land, but sometimes they have to cross barriers like mountain ranges or the North Sea, for example. And in this study, we investigated how bat migratory movements are shaped in response to the barrier, the North Sea. And we investigated the route selection, the timing of migration, the overall migration speed, and the response to wind conditions during overseas flights. And well, this is our main species of interest, Nathusius pipistrelle, which is a small bat, a long distance migrant. So the maternity colonies in summer are located in Northern and Eastern Europe. And in autumn, the females and the juveniles migrate to Southern Europe and Western Europe, including the UK. Well, most migration goes over land, but sometimes, in particular, the Baltic Sea and also the North Sea have to be crossed. Well, in this study, we tagged in the eastern UK at Minsmere and Landguard, and most of the tagging work was done by Jane Harris and Sue Parsons. And in total, 44 bats were tagged during 2 years. Maybe an interesting thing was that one individual was predated by a sparrowhawk, and the tag was retrieved from the pallet of the sparrowhawk, and that was still working. This tag was detected in the eastern UK when during fieldwork activities, when it traveled around in a car. And well, here you can see the study area with the yellow dots are the Motus Telemetry receivers in the UK and the Netherlands, Belgium, and Northern Germany. Well, of those bats, all bats were detected at a tagging location, and 30 were tagged elsewhere. of which 15 on the European mainland. What was very obvious that prior to the crossing over sea, we saw a lot of movements along the coast of the UK. So, and movements to the south, to the north, also up and down the coast. And what we also saw is that crossings over sea are often performed in a, well, generally east-southeastern direction. And that was, well, sort of strange because their breeding areas are in northeastern Europe. So the shortest way to northeastern Europe is also across the North Sea in northeastern direction. Well, after making landfall at the European mainland, they often adjusted their route to the northeast. We saw big differences in timing amongst the sexes. So the females migrated earlier, on average around 10 May, and the males on average the 4th of June. So there was a huge difference in timing of migration. We could all the bats we encountered on the mainland were females, or all but one, and we noticed that the migration speed, including the stopover in the UK, was 61 kilometers per day, and excluding the UK stopover, it was 88 kilometers per day. And this appears to be a little bit higher than the migration speed which is recorded in autumn. We particularly paid attention to the single night migratory flights over sea. We recorded 5 of those. And what we saw is that, well, the bats depart on average about an hour after sunset. And crossings over sea are very fast. So they cross the North Sea in 3 to 5 hours. And that is, well, a distance between 150 and 200 kilometers. And well, when you have to, when you are studying these flights, you have to have a little bit background on air speeds of flying animals like bats or birds. So what is the case is that every animal has some characteristic air speeds, and that include the minimum power velocity. That is the airspeed in which you minimize your energy expenditure compared to time. So for example, a skylark, which can stay hours in the air singing, that uses the minimum power velocity, because then you can stay a maximum amount of time airborne. You also have another characteristic speed, and that is the maximum range velocity. And the maximum range velocity, that optimizes your airspeed in relation to the distance traveled. So it minimizes your energy per kilometer. And in general, animals, bats, birds, they use the maximum range velocity when they migrate. And fortunately for us, those airspeed were measured by Sarah Troxel and colleagues. So we knew that the minimum power velocity was about 5.8 meters per second, and the maximum range velocity was about 7.5 meters per second. What we also know from, in fact, bird migration studies is that there is a maximum angle between the airspeed and the wind speed. So if you fly and you encounter a lot of crosswind, at some point, this crosswind will divert you off track. And we also have a formula for that. So, and with this formula, we can calculate if you can really perform a certain track over sea. But I will get back to that later a little bit more. What we also know from bird migration is that when birds fly over the sea, you cannot compensate for wind drift. When you migrate along the coast, you can attach yourself to the coastline, and when you have crosswind, then you can compensate for that. You sort of attach yourself to the ground. But when you fly over the sea, you cannot attach yourself to the waves. It's impossible. So the consequence is that when you fly over sea in the night, your ground speed, so your resulting speed, is the sum of the wind speed and your own speed. And well, with this background, we try to assess the migratory flight path over sea, and we made two assumptions. So we said, okay, when a bat departs from shore, we assume it uses a fixed heading when it departs, and we also assume that it uses a constant airspeed and it flies at one particular altitude. And well, I'm not going to explain this entire scheme, but what we did is we deployed a very big computer, and in every height layer, we did the same calculation. So starting with a height of 10 meters above ground, we said, okay, we assume that you depart now with 7.5 meters per second in a direction of 100 degrees. So that is east-southeast. And then we, at every time step of 2 minutes, the next location is calculated. And then the next, and then the next, and then the next. And at the measured arrival time, this track is somewhere in continental Europe. And well, when you do this calculation a billion times, then you have one particular combination of airspeed and heading, which gives you the location where you measured that the bat arrived. And well, we did that for every height. Yeah, this computer needs 30 hours for that or so to calculate 5 flight paths, but in the end you have your estimated flight path over sea. And here the results of the calculation is shown. I will briefly explain the upper figure. So on the x-axis, this is the height, and on the y you see the bat airspeed. And so for every layer, the airspeed is estimated. And so what you see in the first one, well, it's about 8.5 meters per second or so. And in the higher layers, it comes into the range of the maximum range velocity and the minimum power velocity, because those are also shown. And when we saw this, we were extremely, well, also a little bit surprised, but at least extremely excited, because our calculated airspeeds match very well with the speeds from the wind tunnel experiments. And what you also show is the gray, what you also see is the gray areas, and these gray areas, they are, they represent flight paths which are not feasible according to this formula of Thomas Allerstam, in which the crosswind is maximized in relation to your own airspeed. So only the flight paths with a white background are possible. And then what you see is that, well, the first bat flew probably between 800 and 1800 meters high, so incredibly high. The second one flew either very low at 10 meters or very high at 2500. The third flew, well, at least 400 meters or higher. The fourth flew below 1000, and the last one flew below 400. What we also saw is that from the data, you can also see that the airspeed is reduced during tailwinds and it increases with crosswinds. And that you can see in the figure here below, because, well, let's look at the crosswind. That is the blue line. Well, in higher crosswinds, higher airspeeds are used. What you also see is that departures, they coincide with moderate tailwinds. And last, these tailwinds enable the bats to increase their airspeed to ground speeds up to 60 kilometers per hour. And that is on average 2.2 times higher than their own airspeed. And last, these flights indicate that bats cross the North Sea in one flight, so non-stop. And here are the estimated flight paths of the 5 individuals. So what is very obvious is that the wind conditions determine the range in which the flights can be performed. We have seen at least 2 flights over 400 and 800 meters. If bats are able to locate the best wind support, much higher flight altitudes are likely used. And if bats use the first optimum, for example, so increase flight height until they encounter worse conditions farther up, then flight altitudes of about 10, 400, 800, 1000 and 1200 meters have been likely used. So to conclude, we've seen from this study that that the barrier affects migratory bat movements, in particularly the routing decisions. So crossings are performed in a way that they reduce the extent of travel over water. And it also includes the avoidance of the open sea. So what you saw from the coastal movements. And we had also one bat which flew first to southern inland and then crossed the channel. The timing of migration depends also in spring on the sex of the animal. It seems that the overall migration speed in spring is a little bit higher than autumn. That is, by the way, also the case in birds. Our estimated airspeeds correspond well with the characteristic airspeeds of wind tunnel experiments. And yeah, bats really use the wind during migration. So they reduce airspeed when flying under tailwind and increase airspeed when flying under crosswind conditions. And that enables them to reduce the drift. Because when you have crosswind, when you, well, slow down, for example, then you will be displaced further. So if you increase your speed, then your displacement is less. We've seen that departures over sea coincide with tailwinds, enabling them to reach ground speeds over 60 kilometers per hour. And it seems that bats frequently select altitudes which are quite high during tailwind conditions, at least. But it seems also that low altitude migration occurs when wind conditions are less favorable, for example, during increased crosswinds or headwinds. And to our best knowledge, this is the first study to estimate flight altitudes using 2D tracking data. And well, a lot of people obviously helped with this study. I think I have no time to acknowledge them all. The research was funded by several organizations, but I think mostly by the Dutch offshore wind ecological program. And then I would like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you very, very much, Sander. That was a really fascinating talk, and it's wonderful to see how much data and how much detail you guys have been able to tease out of what, essentially what's presence and absence at sites. And from the speeds and from your modeling, you can say, well, actually, we can say the bats have been flying at these heights, and we wouldn't have been able to figure, to even have any idea of that without all the hard work you guys have been doing. So thank you again for sharing that. So we are now going to move into the panel. So unfortunately, Ian is not going to be present, but our panel this evening is consisted of Olivier Vinet, who presented on GPS, Sander Lagerveld, presented on Motus, and Sean Walls, who is our segment manager for Lotek. So please feel free to pop your questions in the chat, and I will start with a question for Olivier, which is, how long does it take to download the data from one of the GPS tags? So Olivier, if you have your camera on, thank you. So how long did it take to download the data from one of the tags?
Actually, it really depends on the quality of the signal, because the remote download of the data is being made with VHF signal, and sometimes it takes less than 1 minute, 30 seconds, but sometimes you see on the device that is trying again and again to communicate with the tag, and you have the percentage of the data that has been already downloaded and what's left. So what was very challenging and what was very surprising is when you are at the foot of the tree, sometimes you fail to download the data at 10 meters away from the animal, and on the other hand, we were able to download at 39 kilometers when the bat is flying. So it's very difficult and different, but sometimes it's more than 2 minutes, sometimes it fails, and sometimes it's just working after a series of attempts. So it depends, but around 1 minute. So it's quite fast.
And that kind of leads into another question we've had, which is sort of on average, where that 39 kilometers detection range that you mentioned is absolutely exceptional. That's wonderful. But in generally, you've mentioned already that you did have to get quite close. How close would you have to get to the bats to download the data if you're on foot in the forest?
It really depends on the topography and the slope. Of course, if the animal is just behind some rocks and you have not direct contact, you can be it's like a VHF beacon tracking. Sometimes the animal is 1 kilometer away and you have a signal, and sometimes it's 50 meters away and it's hidden by the terrain, so you don't have a signal. So if you're on an open area, or if you are above the canopy and you can see the forest in front of you because you're on a high altitude, you can have signal from quite a distance. But we usually try to go at something like 100 meter or sometimes 200 meters to be sure that we don't use the battery for nothing. Try to communicate with the tag.
No, that's a very important one to consider. So I suppose this is for, I suppose, or everyone who's presented. How much have your results surprised you by disagreeing with perceived wisdom about those species that you have been? Has there, based upon what we knew about those species when your research began, what has been particularly challenging those perceived notions, that background information we already had?
Well, we were very surprised to see bats flying that high, because it's often thought, at least in the Netherlands, that you can investigate migration routes using your acoustic detector, your handheld detector. That's the way to investigate migration. A lot of people think that, but now we've seen these results. I mean, migration is and acoustics. That's probably not a good match to investigate real migration. I mean, you have to tag the bats who study migration. I mean, acoustics, you can certainly add information, and it's also really good to do that, of course. But in acoustics, you get presence absence, and with telemetry, you get the real movement. So that is.
That's
so therefore, I think telemetry is essential to study migration.
With GPS technology, it's everything is new, so it's very surprising for all that we can learn about it. And about greater nocturnal bat, mainly in Europe, it's a very unknown cryptic species, because we've discovered with the GPS that this species can hunt, go through foraging activity at more than 2,000 meters high above ground level. So that's why in the south of France we have only a few colony known. It's a very discreet animal. So with the GPS, we have lots of new information that explain why this animal is so unknown in Europe. So everything we discover is new with this, and we have lots of things ongoing also with the Sigfox technology, which is the same that Motus. It's the 0G technology. So a lot of things are going to be discovered when with GPS. It's amazing because and it's very fun because I started my work on the bats 15 years ago with VHF classical tracking, and you have the information part by part. And when you do GPS tracking, it's like opening a gift, you download the data and it's so exciting to go, okay, let's see where the animal has been for the last 2 nights. And sometimes you have so insane surprises. We had sometimes 250 kilometers journey at 50 kilometers away from the roost, and we have the whole trajectory. So it's crazy.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely fantastic. And sort of, I think this is one for everyone, which is, where do you see the technology for backtracking evolving over the next decade? We've talked we've talked briefly about how it was, when everyone started, but now the question is, where do we see it going? What technologies do we see evolving in the next 10 years?
Well, I'm really looking forward to the Motus tags with the pressure sensor in it to verify or falsify our calculations. Yeah, that would really be a great improvement. Yeah.
Yeah, and for GPS technology, of course, it's the challenge of the weight of the tag, so miniaturization. And today we are able to equip those big species like Nyctalus lasiopterus, and in Europe maybe 5 or 6 species with smaller tags than the one I presented with Nyctalus lasiopterus, but maybe smaller tags and with less results, of course, because the battery will be less effective. So in the future, I hope we will be able to equip smaller species like Jan presented, Barbastellus, all Myotis in France. Because for us in the forest management, we need to know a lot about other species that we cannot today equip with GPS. So we are looking forward for this year a lot.
Yeah, I think that's mainly where it's going. It is miniaturizing and adding more sensors. I think the accelerometers make a lot of difference to what you can interpret, and the altitude will too.
Yeah, and I didn't mention it, but we were speaking with my colleague, which is on the chat, Vincent Parmin. I work with him, and we were saying that for Nyctalus lasiopterus, it would be so nice to add a small bat detector that we can follow the behavior of hunting, foraging, migration, and
so
everything,
like
and
a call
related.
detector. So
Yeah, and relate this with acoustic behavior.
Mhm.
So that would be amazing.
And it's, to open this up for if anyone else has any requests or things, always feel free to ask. You never know what is in the pipeline. Have a question probably for everyone as well. This is our last question. We'll have to wrap up after this one. So you've both presented some really amazing data, and are you looking for collaborators for future projects for ongoing work? As there's quite a few people here, and I'm sure if you're looking for any collaborators, now's a great time to ask.
Well, our bed tagging project is mostly finished. Well, maybe it new things will come, but yeah, obviously, well, the Motus project is one big collaboration, so it's great if people can, well, also add receivers to the network, and well, obviously, you can combine data sets, or yeah, lots of things to do in the Motus world, but.
Yeah, and there's new stations going up all the time. I was tipped off about there's been a new one put up, I think, this week on the northeast coast of the UK. But the more stations that we get up, the better the data collection.
Yeah.
And also we can compare geographical. We can see whether bats in the same species have got different migration strategies depending upon where they breed, when they breed. So a bat migrating from Portugal, for example, where we have no motor stations right now, or very, very little Motus coverage. If there is one there, I apologize. Compare that to France or compare that to Norway. You know, what the same species of bats that could be found across all of those 3 ranges. You know, how they migrate, is it different?
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to bat tagging studies in Scandinavia, particularly it would also be very exciting to see what bats from Norway do. Do they also cross to the UK?
Yeah.
From Denmark. Yeah.
Yeah, and Olivier, you were asking about getting standard protocols so that you could start pooling data.
Yeah, for sure. On this particular species, like greater nocturnal bat, it would be very interesting to harmonize the methods to be able to pool the data. And I'm already in a small group of bat workers in Europe who are exchanging information about migration, and maybe we will be able to help other countries to set all the parameters for GPS tracking with this species. And with my colleague Vincent Parment, we wanted to write a sort of tutorial for that kind of study. So we started this, but we need more time, and we would be very interested to cooperate with a lot of people because, as I presented it, we went through a lot of experimentation, and it's very tough to find the good settings. Yeah. And it's very, every chip, every tag is very expensive, and it's a lot of time. It's a lot of people working on this. And when you put that kind of big tag on the back of a bat, you really want to have good results. And we were able with my organization to have some tests, but it would be very interesting to help people save time and money with going on the right direction. Just
and having that standardized collection of data that you mentioned is really important for continuity and metadata studies down the line. Pardon me, to bring up my words there. Because when you have a standardized method for collecting data, it allows you to compare. And what's been very exciting about this event is we do have people signed up. We will be releasing a recording of this, as we do have people signed up from all over the globe. So if Olivier, if you are looking for people to collaborate across the world, hopefully your message will reach them, and they'll be able to reach out. So I really apologize if you still have questions in the chat. Unfortunately, we are out of time. If you do have any further questions, do please send them in. We can try and pass them on to Olivier and Sander. But once again, I want to say thank you very, very much to our presenters, Olivier and Sander. You guys have both been absolutely wonderful. Thank you very much for sharing your incredible work on bats. And to everyone else, thank you very much for your time. It's been absolutely wonderful and very interesting. I hope you guys have enjoyed it as much as we have. So thank you again, and we hope to see you at another event very soon. And between then, you're always welcome to reach out, connect with us on our social media channels. We can find on the usual Blue Sky, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram as well. We're always sharing interesting things that are shared with us. So do feel free to connect with us on that. So thank you all very much again, and have a lovely evening.
Thanks all. Great presentations. Thank you. Cheers.